Okay, so the first block we're going to look at in January is Sarah's Wreath. Sarah's Wreath is reverse appliqued. It's a block that lends itself quite well to reverse appliquing because you've got in the centre part just two fabrics. So I have done this block the other way as well, and it works equally as well as individual motifs cut and appliqued on, but I find it's a little bit quicker to do it reverse appliqued. So up to you as to which way you like to do it, but the demonstration I'm going to do today is using reverse applique. Okay, I'm going to just briefly outline how I set up my blocks. I'm sure many of you have your own technique in doing this, but I thought, well, it doesn't hurt just to go through it. So with the block, pattern of the block laid out, I've just marked the centre cross in that. So I found the centre, measured 7.5 inches in on both sides, as it's a 15-inch block. And then, as you can see, I've already finished my block, so very speedy work there. But with your background fabric, you would fold that also in half, find the midpoint, and finger press in half again, find the midpoint, and then you would just line those midpoints up so that you can get the centre and it's all lined up. So because I've already done this, I'm just going to show you on a little sample piece that I'll be able to demonstrate. And this is just a small piece just to show you how I do the reverse applique and how I'm going to do the points and the curves. So by no means is this the whole block. We just lay that over the top. We're going to pop a couple of pins in purely just to stop it from slipping on you, because there's nothing worse than drawing a line and then finding that it's moved on you and nothing lines up when you go to sew it. It's not a good look. Okay, so we'll just pop a couple of pins in there. Obviously you'll have a square and you'll pin it the whole way around just to hold it. I'm using a fine mechanical pencil. This is actually a 0.72B, and I find this is quite good, or a lot of the quilting ones are a 0.9 and they're great too. If you have anything smaller than that or an HB, you'll find that the pencil lead snaps on you all the time. It's really frustrating. So just trace, and I know you'll probably not be able to see it, but you're just tracing along the pattern there, just so that you're transferring it onto your background fabric. Alright, so once you've transferred your whole design, you're going to unpin it. And we'll just put that aside because we don't need that for now. And taking your background fabric, or sorry, not your background fabric, your red shirting fabric, you're going to place that right side up and place the shirting also right side up over the top of it. So you're going to have two 18-inch squares. You're going to lay the red one down first, background one on the top of it, and you're going to just initially just pin that on so that, again, it's secured. So you would be centering this again, making sure that everything is square. Once you've done that, I just baste around the very edge of my block. So just using just normal thread. You don't need to use applique thread, obviously, for this part. Okay, so once you've basted just around the outside just to hold it together, I then like to baste just a little bit out from the actual design in the parts that you're not going to be cutting away. So this has got a heart which we're going to cut away so that it will reveal the red underneath. So you don't want to actually baste within the parts that you're going to be cutting away, and you just want to be far enough away that you're not going to have to cut the threads to actually do your applique. So just running it around there, and you'll do this right throughout the block. Okay, so when we come here, I'm going to jump over and just space down within this little diamond here, because that diamond is actually going to end up being shirting. We're not going to cut that away, but we are going to cut the big star in the centre away. So we'll just pop a few stitches in there. And again, this is just a sample, so you'll do this on the whole block, but it will give you an idea where we're going. So I'm just going to show you on this main one. So you can see here, these diamonds here end up being shirting. So we're not actually going to cut them away. So what I've done here was I've basted all the way around the outside to hold the layers together. This blue leaf is going to be appliqued on later on top, so we're not going to worry about this at this stage. We're just looking at the red and the red shirting and the background shirting. So I'm going to baste all the way around, and then we're just going to baste within here just to hold it together, and that will secure the centre bit. Okay, once we're prepared, we're going to actually cut away the shirting fabric just so that we reveal the red fabric underneath. So being really careful, so you'll see I've basted around. Carefully, just gently pull those two layers apart. I don't know whether you can see that, but I've pulled them apart. And then just gently doing a little snip in the top layer. And you've got to be careful with that, because the last thing you want is to get all the way around, and then the last one you accidentally cut through the background. So once I've done that, I'm just going to trim that away so that I've got about a 3/16 of an inch seam allowance inside the actual pencil line. Now any curves, you can actually come in a little bit closer than that, but I always just err on the side of caution to start with. You can always trim back, but you can't put back on, so you've just got to be careful. You don't want to trim it back so far that it frays, and then you're in all sorts of trouble. Trimming that back. And you'll just completely remove that excess shirting fabric. Okay, I'll just get rid of that. So now we're going to applique, and I like to start just before a point. It's just good to get those ones out of the way. So just cutting down so that you're within 1 or 2 threads of the actual point. So you don't want to trim down so close that you can't actually turn it under because it's fraying. So once you've trimmed that through, just flicking it under using your needle turn applique along that pencil line. So you don't want to actually see that pencil line, you want to flip underneath so that you can't see that. Taking a little stitch and burying your background between the two layers and heading down towards that point. You can always clip in a little bit further if you haven't clipped in far enough, but to start with, don't be too, don't clip away too much. Better to do a little bit more later. So with this little internal curve here, I've actually trimmed that back a little bit further than we've trimmed this, so just for ease, as I mentioned earlier. However, if you're finding that you still can't get it really smooth, you can do a couple of little snips into that curve just to ease it and make it easier to turn, because you don't want it a jagged seam, you want a nice smooth seam. So sometimes if you get a jagged seam and you can't get it smooth, it's because your seam allowance isn't quite small enough to turn under easily. So we're approaching this internal point here, so I'm going to just needle turn that, flick that seam allowance underneath and smooth that out. And I'm just anchoring that with my thumb in the meantime, so I've got it nice and secure and turned under, and I'm going to go down there, get to that point. And once you get to that point, right on that pencil mark where the point of the heart changes direction, we're going to just do 2 stitches on the spot. And this is just going to hold that first seam line down. Now you can see now that we've got this little daggy bit that's hanging out, so I'll just trim that off so that it's straight. And then putting the point of my needle in where I've just done that stitch, I'm going to run my needle up the actual fold, and I'm going to just turn it at right angles so that it's turning that seam allowance underneath. I'm going to hold it with my thumb and just gently give that a pull and do another stitch. So this is actually into your, what will become your point. So another couple of stitches there. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to go in with the point of my needle along that fold, and again flick the needle to turn the seam allowance underneath. And you can see how that just eases that seam underneath, and then just with the point of your needle you can move any excess through as well. And then again you can complete that curve. Now if you need to, you can trim a little bit more seam allowance. As I said earlier, sometimes I err on the side of caution and I don't trim it all back at once, but I'll come back and trim it as I need to. And using those techniques we can complete the heart. Alright, I'm just going to show you this little point here where the star intersects with the heart, just at the points, and exactly the same technique as we've done with the heart. So we'll just needle turn this little section here, and you'll see I just popped an extra pin in here. If you need to, if you haven't quite basted closely enough, you can always just use the little applique pins just to hold it down until you pass that bit, and then just pop them out. So again, we're going to snip in to within a couple of stitches of the point. As previously, you can always snip further in if you need to, but you don't want to snip so close that it's going to fray. When you get down towards that point, you're just going to do exactly what we did before, but it is fairly close because you've got the other point just above it. So in through the top layer, just to catch anything, and I do 2 little stitches in there. And then turning your work around, I'll just cut a little bit more off there because that's a bit of a generous seam allowance. And just with the head of your needle, point of your needle, just bringing that back so that you get a nice tidy point at the end. Stitch through all the layers in the point. Okay, so once you've finished the reverse applique, so you've done all your hearts and your star in the centre, you'll then trim away all of the excess of the red shirting fabric so that you get a nice neat seam allowance on the back. So just being very careful when you're coming into these diamonds that you're pulling the fabrics apart so that you're not going to pierce the top background fabric, which would be an absolute disaster once you've done all that work. So once you've completed those, you'll then applique the blue flowers over the top, and you've already marked, when you initially marked your pattern onto your background fabric, you will have marked the position for those in place. So you can then applique that, and once you've done that, press from the back gently, and block 1 is complete.